Hi, it's Pastor Cross coming to you from our church nursery. I'm very much looking forward to the day when this space is going to be filled with your children again, and we'll all be able to worship and spend time together again as a church family. As appreciative as I have been for technology, there's still something very special about the power of us to get together live with a group of other believers, right? The book of Hebrews says, let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good works. And we can do that virtually, but there's something special that happens when we get to do that together as a congregation. So I wanted to let you all know that at Alexandria Free Methodist Church, we are still all in for God, all in for the next generation, and all in for the community. The life of the church has been continuing, even though most of you have not been able to be here. There's been some improvements made on the property, which you'll get to see when you come back. There's been outreaches going on through some food distribution and through our porch concerts, as well as through Zoom Bible studies and this posting that's going out now on Facebook. And if you would like to find out more about those, or if you'd like to contact me personally or the church, you can go to alexandriafmc.org and find out more about that. Just wanted to share a thought with you as we move on. I've been thinking a lot about the parallels between the situation we find ourselves in and the Passover and the events surrounding Passover in the book of Exodus. Right? Most of you know the story of the Passover. It was a time when the Jewish people were told by God to return to their homes, and they worshiped together as a family. And while all these bad things were happening around them, right, God told them how those events would be able to pass over them if they were obedient to Him. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the things that led up to the Passover. And there's 10 plagues listed in the book of Exodus that happened. You may remember some of them. There was the water turned of the Nile turned into blood, the frogs, the sun, the livestock, the boils, the hail, the horrible event and the death of the firstborn, and how through each of those things, God was trying to get the attention of Pharaoh, but he refused to listen. He was stubborn and missed what God was trying to say to him, which was this desire that God had in his heart. I believe it's a desire that God always has in his heart, that his people would be free, to be all that God had wanted them to be. So I was thinking about that and how each of those plagues, you could study this more yourself. You can go online or look into a concordance. But each of the plagues listed in the book of Exodus were somehow linked to a god that the Egyptians worshipped. So I thought about our own situation as a society and how these things around us have been affecting us. And we in America worship a lot of different things, right? And a lot of those things that we worship as a society have been directly affected by this coronavirus pandemic. I think one of the first things I think of is money in and of itself, right? Right before these events started, our economy was booming, and we took great pride in our economy and our financial resources. And I spoke with several people about how their 401ks were going up and how well they were doing financially. And overnight, that thing that we trusted in took one of the biggest hits it's ever taken in the history of our country. Then I was thinking of sports, how much we as a society value sports. And I love sports. I personally miss baseball. I look forward to when it's going to start again. But I remember a couple of years ago watching the Super Bowl, 2 years ago when the New England Patriots won. And they were presenting the Super Bowl trophy. And as it was being walked through this line of people, some people were bowing down, some people were kissing it, some people were just wanting to touch it and were in tears. And I remember looking at my wife and saying, if 200 years in the future, somebody looks back on this film, or 1,000 years from now, and they were watching this event, and if they didn't know what football was, and if they didn't know what the Super Bowl was, they would think that they were watching a religious ceremony. So I believe we as a society have worshiped sports. And sports right now are gone. Another thing I thought of is how important food has become in our society, and how we're all packing on a little bit too much more weight than we should. And I was thinking about how on television, a new phenomena really in the last 10 years has been the explosion of food shows. If you could be pornographic with food, it's what happens with America. As we not only ingest all this food ourselves, but we spend hours watching preparing food on television. And isn't it interesting right now that even the meat supply in our country is being affected? This God that we worship, actually the New Testament talks about how our stomach can become a god, is being affected. And then I think about how much our approach to pets has changed in my lifetime. And it's almost as if we worship our pets as a society, as people are still starving around the world, right? We're holding benefits for homeless pets. And we need to care for our pets. We need to love them. Actually, it was Christians who were the first ones who started the ASPCA. Do you know that? It was Christians who were the first to care for animals and demand that animals be treated properly. But somehow we as a society have taken it 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 steps further. And I heard, I even heard on the news this week how the first cases of cats and dogs contracting the coronavirus have happened. And then there's science, right? We are all appreciative for the work that our scientists are doing this time. And Christianity, right, we know is not hostile to science. But as we talk, I've heard a lot of talk about money and sports and food and pets and science, but not the God who created all those things. And just like with the Egyptians, and the events that led up to their Passover, I believe God is trying to get our attention through all these things that we worship in our society. How he's trying to get our attention to say these are all things that are good in their proper place, but somehow we have all lost our focus. So as we conclude this video, I want us to think again of that imagery from Passover, right? Where the blood of the lamb was supposed to be placed over the doorposts of the house, over people's homes as they gathered. And that blood, right, which symbolized our trust and relationship with God, and also pointed us to the greatest sacrifice of blood, which was the death of Jesus on the cross for us, is what is meant to protect us and provide us meaning. So I want to encourage you as a family to seek God, to take communion together as a family, and to celebrate what Jesus did for you at Calvary. Jesus is our Passover lamb. So I want to encourage you not to lose heart in this time, to keep pushing through, to keep listening to God, and maybe repenting of some of these things and saying, God, I want to value the things that are really important, right? Primarily you, my family, other people around me, and how I can make this world a better place, and how I can point people to Jesus. So be safe, be well. Remember, we're praying for you. If you want to contact us as a church, you can at alexandriafmc.org. We are praying for you, and we'll be in touch with you in the next few days.